tell them, don't get sucked into this. He's talked about others in chapter 2, different kinds. But this one, he says, above all, avoid this teaching. Scoffers will come in the last days, scoffing and following their own evil desires, and they will say, where is his coming that he promised? That's the thing that he wants to warn them about. They'll say, where is his coming that he promised? Ever since our ancestors fell asleep, all things continue as they have been since the beginning of creation. So these false teachers, what they're saying is, look, I know he said he's coming back, but where is he? And we've been living this life, and our ancestors have died, and their ancestors have died, and God has been talking about this since Genesis, and where is it? And they're gonna say, it's not coming. Forget about it. Even people who would say they believe in Jesus, they're going to say this ending time of his second coming, y'all misunderstood that. That's not really what's going to happen. And so Peter is telling them, don't listen to those to remember. But the word also has an element of deliberate. It's not just forgetting. It's like deliberately forgetting. Forgetting because you want to forget. One of the interpreters I read kind of parsed it out this way: for this escapes those men who wish it to be so. They are so caught up in their own sinfulness and their own false teachings that they don't want it to be the way that God has called it to be. They want it to be this. So they're forgetting on purpose because they don't want this second coming thing to be true. And they say they deliberately, darkness covered the surface of the watery depths, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the water. So for the ancient Hebrews' mind, before God created anything, this expanse of water existed, okay? And God covered it. And there's a lot of things going on there. Ancient Israelites they did not like the sea. They were not sea-traveling people. The Philistines, Philistine, the name means people of the sea. The Philistine people were from the sea. For the Israelites, the sea meant chaos. Was unpredictable. You know, you look at a rough sea and the water's just sloshing all over. They didn't like the same thing for the disciples. Something that we probably don't understand when Jesus calms the storm on the water is how much fear that put into the heart of an Israelite, because they didn't like water. And part of that comes from this creation story that there was in the beginning. We think of the earth as a ball hovering through the vacuum of space, moving through the air. That is not how they saw the earth. They just didn't know. This is the way, and God, the beauty of God's creation story is that it fits no matter what we learn. It fit then and it fits now. It's a beautifully poetic creation story that God came up with, meaning that it's true, but it applies to all the scientific discoveries you could ever make. Okay, so what in their mind, they lived on an earth that was like a disk of land existing in the sea, which God. So the first thing was the waters, and God called land out of that, and then He creates all the things. And you had this land underneath the earth was Sheol. That was hell for them. And then underneath that was the watery depths. They get that from the creation story. And then it's also mentioned in Psalms and things like that, that underneath even Sheol was this watery depths that was like farther down than that even. And the earth was built on these foundations, the foundations of the earth. And those were kind of, there must be water up there. And so they pictured this firmament that held back the waters. Now, if you read Noah's story, you understand why it talks about God letting the waters so He kind of put these, in their mind, windows in the firmament and let the water that's up there flood the earth. So you've got this firmament, and they sit on these foundations that were probably, in their mind, high mountain peaks that held up that firmament that's like so far beyond them they couldn't see it. All right, so this is their vision of how the world existed. It's not, I hope this doesn't give you any kind of like angst. It's not that makes the creation story false. It means that God had to reveal to the ancient Hebrews a creation story they could fathom that still we're at the current apex, but I have no doubt that in 200 years we'll understand things so much better that, that will just reveal to us the beauty and the immense complexity of God's creation. But God wrote to them to help them understand even within their own mindset, okay? And that same story it's applied throughout. It still tells us the same truth, that God calls creation out of nothingness, that he is the one who, through these, meaning water and the word, through the water and the word, the world at that time perished when it was flooded. Okay, so God called it into being from the water, and then he's talking about Noah's flood. During the Noahic flood, he used water to wipe it clean. And by that same word, the present heavens and earth are stored up for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the... He made this, and it was good. Everything he makes is good, except for it's not good for man to be alone. That's the first time we see something being not good. But everything that he makes is good. The creation doesn't become not good because we tainted it. It's still good, but our tainting has kind of gotten into everything. And so sin is the problem in the Noahic flood. And so God uses the flood not to destroy the earth, but to wash it. Right? He washes it, just like in all of his laws in the, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers, where it replaces those. Every time something happens, things have to be washed. The elements for the temple have to be washed. If you've had some kind of disease, you have to be washed. If you've sinned, there's all this ritualistic washing, because the way to eliminate sin is through washing of water. So God uses the Noahic flood to purify, to wash the world, or to wash the world of its sin then. So then it says, by the same word, the present heavens and the earth are stored up for fire. So water was used to wash last time. Next time, it's fire is being kept for the world that's got some stuff that's not right with it. If you heat it up hot enough, you'll burn that bad stuff out and be left with, like, so say, gold. If you get gold hot enough and you throw a piece of tin in it, eventually the gold will stay in the impurities will be burned out. So what God is doing with the fire is not destroying the earth, but purifying the things on it that made it ungodly, or you might have unrighteous. So it's not a destruction of the earth, it's a purification of the earth. Why does that matter? Because I think that we have, in some ways, I think it's fairly recent, like in the 20th century and later, we're kind of wrapped up in this God bringing all things to completion, and we want to see just eternal home, right? Two things you need to know, things that I didn't learn until I was much older, and I wish I had kind of nailed them in when I was younger. But heaven is not our final home. The final, and in that state, all right, so our final home is in our resurrected bodies, our bodies rejoined with our spirit, in the place that God created in the beginning that was good, reunited with God in the garden, really. Yeah, and let me give you, and look, so while we're talking about that, let's turn to Revelation 21. Actually, we're going to get to it, and we'll go there in just a little bit. Stay where you are, because it's going to talk about new heavens and new earth, and I want you to, in a second. Yeah, at night in the dark, when you're not, when you can't be seen, and when bad things happen, you always heard that nothing good happens after midnight. You ever heard that saying, thieves come in the night? What else did you say? I heard somebody say least expected. Yep, when it's least expected, a bad thief would come when they are expected, right? A bad thief would put a letter in your mailbox. I'm coming to get your stuff on this day at this time. That's a poor thief. All right, whoever the Antichrist, and you keep going back, is Hitler the Antichrist? I mean, everybody has had a guess of who these people are. I'm sure that the people who were probably living when Paul wrote this, they're like, is Nero the Antichrist? I mean, we have been doing this for the whole time. And Jesus also made a point to world is built on, like, and not physical things, like how the world works. Maybe is maybe how you would translate that word as a more accurate. So, what are the ways that the world operates? Well, usually not good things. Like, we're talking about not the ways that God created it to work, but the way that usually we have some kind of course of action. But that is a very, that's a very American privilege where righteousness dwells. Look with me, be no more, because the previous things have passed away. And then the one seated on the throne said, look, I am making everything new. And he said, write these words, because they no longer dwell with us. And in the end, he redeems the story and comes back to dwell with his people through the blood of Christ. That's the story of the gospel. That's what God is. It is the gospel, but it's also the story of the whole Bible. That's the story that the Bible is drawing for us. If you're trying to draw a huge narrative arc over the whole thing,